What's going on, Patriots fans? This is Jason Cole back with another edition of the Patriots Drive podcast. If you guys have not already, make sure you like, subscribe, comment down below your thoughts on this video. We're going to be talking about the three biggest free agency positions we think the Patriots need to address before the 2025 NFL draft. Obviously, we will know who they have signed before the draft, so we'll kind of know the route of the draft picks or maybe what positions they wanted to target in the draft. But right now, we want to talk about what we think are the three most important ones to address in that period. So without further ado, let's jump right into the video. Are you tired of trying to find the best deals on tickets to your favorite events, concert, and games? Then SeatGeek is the answer. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. You can find the best deals thanks to their app and website showing you what prices are good and bad. And now you can use code PATRIOTSDRIVE for $20 off your purchase. So go ahead and get those tickets you've been eyeing because you don't want to miss out. Okay, so like we mentioned, we got three positions here, a couple on defense or a couple on offense and then one on defense, and then an alternate one we'll kind of talk about. So Cole, what do you think is the first position the New England Patriots should and need to address going into free agency?
Yeah, I think something they desperately need and is, I think, a clear focus after you watch the Super Bowl is off defensive line. Just getting an edge rusher, getting somebody who can play in the run game, in the pass game. And I think there's a few different solid options in this free agency class. There's not a ton of young superstar players, not really at any positions that hit the market, but a couple guys. You got like a Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, both just had solid seasons. Josh Sweat in the Super Bowl was fantastic. I think he had 2.5 sacks and just was wreaking havoc, causing a ton of pressure. There's a couple other guys who are kind of more under the radar names, maybe like Chase Young is somebody who was the number 2 overall pick. I think number 2 overall pick.
Yeah.
Didn't really work out. He's still almost 26 years old. Getting a guy like that, hasn't had the elite production, but somebody who can still impact the game and wouldn't be necessarily like a dominant pass rusher, but a guy who can kind of play both ways. He actually had a solid year in 2024. He was with the Saints. He was a top 20 edge defender in total quarterback pressures. He had 66 and a pressure rate of 15%. So still a solid player. There's just not a ton of top tier talent. The guys at the top of the market are going to be getting $20 million, $18 million a year. The top guy right now is Khalil Mack, but he's going to be like 34 years old. So I definitely think they need to address it in free agency. And it doesn't seem like Abdul Carter is going to make it to them at pick 4 in the draft. So getting somebody ahead of time, preparing for that real possibility that he won't be there, I think would give them a good head start.
Yeah, and guys, just so you know, we will in the upcoming weeks be releasing a full 5 defensive and 5 offensive players we want them to target. So we'll dive more into names, but yeah. I think when you look at the edge, yeah, there's some clear-cut guys there, and I think this is a position you probably can take in free agency. And if you don't get one of those top guys, Josh Sweat, Chase Young, one of those guys that you really want that you think could be a difference maker, maybe you have to reach into the second round, or if Abdul Carter falls there at 4, you're obviously going to take him. So, there's a way for them to do that. But the Patriots averaged 1.6 sacks per game this year. That was the worst in the NFL. Like, their pass rush was non-existent. They did not have enough. Keon White started out the season hot, but he did not progress into a true elite pass rusher. They dealt Josh Uche to the Chiefs, who was a big part of the 2023 season, or 2022 one with Matt Judon, when they both had 11 plus sacks. You lost a ton of production. Now, Keon White could still make it. I don't think he can ever be a 10 sack a year guy. He's just not that dynamic, but he is a really good pass rusher. So you maybe need to add that elite guy. Like I said, we'll talk more in depth on guys, but Josh Sweat would be a perfect example right there. 2.5 pressure, 2.5 sacks or whatever in the Super Bowl, was an absolute beast. So I think edge is a sneaky need in both the offense or in both the free agent and the draft. And I think this next one that we're going to talk about, offensive line, is in the same category. I think that tackle or interior offensive line needs to be addressed in both free agency and the draft. So when you're talking about free agency, it's a little bit hard, right? Because again, it's not the deepest class. When you look at the tackle class, Cam Robinson would probably be the top of the class there. He played left tackle for the Vikings this year, played left tackle for the Jaguars for the last couple years. Other than that, it's going to be a 31-year-old Ronnie Stanley. You take a chance on a guy who was a first round pick in Jedrick Wills, who hasn't really panned out for the Browns. Or, in my opinion, do you just say, hey, let's address the interior and let's take a chance on Trey Smith, who I would love for them to get. I don't know if he reaches free agency, and then you can address tackles in the draft. But it's another it's another free agency position that's a little bit down. There's just not elite talent at the tackle position. So how do they add a veteran piece or add an experienced piece that can contribute right now? Because there's a lot of holes on this offensive line the Patriots need to fill.
Yeah, and I think we'll have the combine measurement numbers before tampering, right?
We should, yes, because the combine ends on March 2nd.
Okay, yeah, so we should have those numbers. So I think that might tell you a lot. If Will Campbell tests out and he has 33, 34-inch arms, like if he passes the arm length test, we might be having a different conversation. But if he comes in with 31-inch arms and doesn't pass that threshold, we've seen kind of a lot of guys that look like they might translate better to guard that we thought were going to be top tier tackles in this class during the draft. So if that's the case, and you don't feel confident that you can get one of these guys early on, unless you feel really confident about your evaluation of a guy in the early second round or trading back up into the back end of the first, I think you got to try to get one of these tackles. I mean, we saw how bad it can be if, again, in the Super Bowl, if you don't have a good offensive line and you're going up against one of these monster D lines, it's tough. It makes it really tough. And you want to protect Drake May. I think Vrabel, he really touched on that a ton during his press conference, and throughout all the interviews he did, was just starting in the trenches. And it's tough to do things if you don't have a good offensive and defensive line in the NFL. So, like you mentioned, not a ton of great options, but if you can grab one of those guys, one of those top two, if you don't feel good about Will Campbell or some of these other guys, I think that's a good idea. Just you got to try to protect Drake May. I do understand that the Trey Smith at guard, but I feel better about our interior options right now than our tackle situation. Our tackle situation is brutal. So, I mean, between guards, you can figure it out between David Andrews, Cole Strange, City So, Layden Robinson. So you have options there. Tackle, there's nothing. You basically got nothing, unless you trust Caden Wallace to play right, and then who you got at left. So there's too many needs. There's too many holes on this offensive line in general. You might be able to address both, but probably not both in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes it hard because, like you mentioned, a lot of the elite offensive tackles in the draft are going to project better as guards. I believe that that's going to be the same with Will Campbell. You can put him out there and let him try until he fails, but that just doesn't seem like a sure plan because, okay, eventually he's going to move in the guard. Now, what's your left tackle solution? That's the biggest need. So for me, I still love the idea of Trey Smith. I think Trey Smith, David Andrews, and Michael Winu in the interior would be great. Hope Caden Wallace develops at right tackle, or maybe you can take a chance on an older right tackle. The big question is who's the left tackle in the draft that you take? Yeah. Armand Membu, Josh Connerly, do you trade back up into first? Like, it's going to be hard to acquire one of the few, in my opinion, true tackles because of the arm length issues that are coming up when we're getting these measurements. So that's going to be the biggest thing is if you do not take a left tackle in free agency, when and how do you get one in the draft?
Yeah, it's just the only thing with Trey Smith is his projection right now is 4 years at $20.5 million annually. Are you gonna, as the Patriots, pay two guards over $20 million a year? If so, you're going to have to do a damn good job getting a tackle in the draft because there's no way you're signing a top tackle if you have two guards at over $20 million a year. That just it doesn't make sense. It's you can't build it that way. So if they get Trey Smith and you ignore tackle in free agency, I would hope that Will Campbell's numbers tested out well, and you're confident about him being a left tackle for the foreseeable future. That would be a situation where I'd be like, okay, Trey Smith, you got Will Campbell at left tackle. Then you got Trey Smith, David Andrews, Mike Onwenu, and then maybe Caden Wallace at right tackle. That's a lot better than it was last year. And I believe Trey Smith mainly played right guard, so he might have to switch back to left guard.
He played left guard in college at Tennessee, and mostly right guard because of Joe Tooney.
Yeah, with the Chiefs. So if he goes back to left guard, Onwenu at right guard, Andrews or Cole Strange at center, that would be very intriguing. I think a lot has to do with some of these testing numbers coming out. That'll paint a much better picture for how this offensive line, free agency, and draft will go for the Patriots.
Yeah, I totally agree. The one thing that I will say that, in my opinion, makes it easier to, if you were to pay Trey Smith and Michael Winnu, you have a rookie quarterback that, hey, at some point, Michael Winnu and Trey Smith are going to be off the books before you have to pay Drake May in his 5th year. So if that's how you feel is the best way to build the offensive line and get a rookie tackle, then you have the flexibility to do it because Drake May is on a rookie contract for 4 more seasons.
If you're going to do it, now's the time to do it.
Yes, now is exactly the time. So next one, Cole, which one, what position is it?
Yeah, this one's wide receiver. And this class is pretty top heavy with maybe 1, maybe 2 guys. It's not great. And it's T. Higgins, Chris Godwin. Those are kind of your top 2 guys. And then you're getting into some veterans, even Chris Godwin, a veteran with some injury history. Stephon Diggs coming off a torn ACL, and he's going to be 32 next year. DeAndre Hopkins. There's no guy in here outside of maybe T. Higgins that you can say that can be our number 1 receiver and we're good. We finally have our top tier receiver. So if T. Higgins re-signs with the Bengals before free agency, it's going to be really interesting to see how the Patriots approach this. I personally would be okay with Chris Godwin as long as it's not like super long term. He's 29. He's going to be 29 soon. So maybe give him a 3-year deal. I just think he would fit in the Josh McDaniels offense. I think he'd be a good guy to fill that role. He's been kind of a versatile guy, but mostly kind of like slot Z type receiver with Mike Evans being the X on the outside. So I think he could be a versatile piece in this offense for Drake May. It could be a target machine. It always takes a year typically after ACL injuries to kind of get back to yourself. So he might not be perfect in year 1. And I see the downside of that is you're hoping to kind of get an impact guy this year for Drake May. But if T. Higgins goes back to the Bengals and you don't sign Chris Godwin, are you going to take T-Mac at 4? Are you going to try to take Travis Hunter and play him at receiver? I like that option. If Abdul Carter's there, though, you got to take him at 4. If Abdul Carter's there and then Tet. So it's tough. Then you're talking about, oh, well, we can draft the number 1 receiver in the 2nd round. Well, that's a lot harder than it. I mean, we have not had success with that.
For every team other than us, it's easy, but the Patriots, it's really hard.
Yeah, Jalen Polk was our last 2nd round pick. The one before that, wide receiver wise, was Tyquan Thornton. Neither of those have worked out so far. I mean, Tyquan hasn't worked out. Polk to be determined, but really bad first year. So I think you're playing a tricky game there if you don't get one good receiver in free agency. I just think you're setting yourself up for failure there unless you go trade up and try to grab one of these receivers in the mid to late 1st round. That's personally what I think that we should do if we can't get T. Higgins.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd be fine with Godwin too, but for me, it's really like, hey, if T. Higgins isn't there, you need to maybe look at the trade market. I'm not interested in Deebo Samuel with that contract and his age. So you turn to you turn to DK Metcalf. Maybe there's a sleeper. I don't think Garrett Wilson would get traded to the Patriots because he's on the Jets. But if that team, starts to go downhill, like it's looking bleak. And so that's
Cooper Kupp to fill it temporarily, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, another guy that's older. It's hard, right? Because I think other than offensive line, the biggest thing Drake May needs is a number 1 option. And that doesn't mean it has to be a number 1 wide receiver, but Chris Godwin would be the number 1 option for New England. Clearly, he'd be the clear number 1 option. T. Higgins would obviously be that number 1 guy for New England. So I think adding a number 1 pass catcher is way important for the Patriots this year. You cannot leave Drake May out to dry like you did Mac Jones. You have to give him an offensive line, and you have to give him a receiving core that can do it. So I talked to you before this. For me, receiver scares the crap out of me outside of T. Higgins. Older guys coming off of injuries that are a little bit older on the back half of their careers. Like you said, they're fillers. What's the long-term solution? Who's the guy that can grow with Drake May? Is it Tet McMillan at 4? If it's T. Higgins, then that's great. That's the best case scenario because he's 26 and you sign him to a big deal. Why Drake May still on his rookie contract? They grow together. Is it Tet Millen at 4? Is it trade up for Ibuka? Is it take Jaden Higgins or Xavier Restrepo in the second? It's just, yeah. But like you said, then there's going to be questions. Well, we suck at drafting receivers. The Patriots have not been good historically. Now they have a couple different guys, obviously on staff and in the front office that have drafted AJ Brown and gotten a little bit more out of some of their receivers. So maybe it will change, but you also can't hang your hat on that one. The one position I want to throw in that's just a little bit of a curveball is if we can't get T. Higgins to sign in free agency, I would love for the Patriots to target a corner. I think the cornerback class, when you look at some of these guys that are at the top of the cornerback class, this is one of the deeper classes there. You got DJ Reed, Javarius Ward, Rasul Douglas, Carlton Davis, Asante Samuel Jr., Byron Murphy, Mike Hilton. You got some guys that are still in their mid to late 20s that I think could be really good cornerback twos alongside Christian Gonzalez. And then if you address that, that lets you take an extra tackle in the third or an extra edge rusher or an extra receiver in the third to fill in the gaps that you missed if you can't sign some of these positions. So corner for me is a sneaky big target if you can't sign T. Higgins. I would almost rather say, hey, you miss out on T. Higgins. That's a lot of money. Okay, let's pivot and let's give DJ Reed some of that money. Or, like you mentioned, let's give Josh Sweat some of that money and then find a Rasul Douglas. Or like, I would be really comfortable with taking a corner in this class and saying, hey, we don't need to draft one because now you have Marcus Jones, you have Christian Gonzalez, you sign one of these guys. And then depending on what happens with John Jones, you have a pretty good corner room with Alex Austin also.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the better free agent classes is corner here. And one guy kind of intriguing, Asante Samuel Jr., still 25 years old, had a tough start to his year before getting injured, but still young, a guy who's shown flashes, is pretty talented still. I think that'd be a good mold to work with. But like you mentioned, the Carlton Davises, the Wards, DJ Reed, if you can get one of those guys, I do think that's a good use of your resources. Even if you get T. Higgins, I still think we need a lot of things. You can't address them necessarily all in one offseason, but you could really use a good edge defender, a good left tackle, a good wide receiver 1, a corner 2 is a pretty. I think it's a sneaky need that people don't really pay as much attention to because we have Gonzo. So it might not be as exciting, but if you can get a good number 2 corner to pair with Christian Gonzalez, I think that helps you out a lot. Especially in a system that typically likes to not blitz a ton and rush 4. If you can get a pass rusher who can get some pressure, and then you have 2 corners who you feel really, really good about, I think that helps you out quite a bit.
I totally agree. And for those of you guys that forgot, the Patriots have the most cap space in the NFL by far, 120 million. Now they have some guys they need to resign. John Jones, Dietrich Weiss, some of those guys are kind of on deals, and you're going to say, hey, are they going to bring them back or whatever? But they have a lot of wiggle room. Geez, sorry, that was a tough one. Even if they spend 20 million to keep the guys on their roster, $100 million to spend on new free agents is a ton of money. And we said this with Mac Jones, and it's more important now because of Drake May and how good he can be. You have got to take advantage of him on a rookie contract. You have got to take an opportunity and take a chance on getting T. Higgins if it costs you. Maybe you have to pay suck tax to get him. You have to do it. You have to get an elite edge rusher because Abdul Carter probably won't be there. You need to find a left tackle for him or an interior guy and then draft the other to protect him because he can't do anything if he's on his back. This is probably the most crucial free agency and draft in the franchise's history because of how bad they've been the last 3 years drafting and because of how important it is for Drake May to develop. So this is going to be a huge free agency class. Excited to jump more into it. Like I mentioned, it will be top 5 defensive targets, top 5 offensive targets, and then we'll give you a whole kind of wish list of free agency before free agency actually opens early March. So the next 3 weeks, other than mock draft on Mondays, it's going to be free agent talk. So make sure you guys hit that like, subscribe button, and you comment down below who you want the Patriots to target, what you think is the biggest draft need. And of course, turn the notification bell on so when we post or we go live, you guys can tune in and chat with us or watch our video. So appreciate all the support. And until next time, we will talk to you guys later.